everyone, I'm so excited to be hosting this workshop with Manuscript. My name's Millie and I've been doing calligraphy for over 10 years. I run a business called Blink Lettering and I'm known for my bright colourful calligraphy, my obsession with blending and my love for all things glitter and sparkle. Over the past 10 years, I've dipped my toes into lots of different types of calligraphy and I'm now proud to say that I'm a published author. I've taught over 3,000 people online and in person. And I just love sharing my passion for calligraphy. So it was so exciting that Manuscript asked me to host this workshop and show off what you can do with their amazing Aquabrush pens. So let's dive into this workshop and create something colourful and fun. For this Colourful Calligraphy Blending workshop, we're going to be using a range of Manuscript products to bring this piece to life. So before we dive into the workshop, I'm just going to talk you through each of these products. The star of this workshop is going to be the Manuscript Aquabrush pens. These are brush pens that you can blend with water to create a beautiful watercolour effect. The pack even comes with its own paintbrush. These pens have a brush tip, which means that you can create thick and thin lines, which is perfect for modern calligraphy. They're so easy to use as standard brush pens or even as watercolour brush pens, so they're perfect for beginners. If you're completely new to calligraphy and need a little bit of guidance with letter forms, then check out the free printable Modern Calligraphy Alphabet Guide, which is linked in the description below. Alongside the Aquabrush pens, we're also going to be using the Shimmering Rainbow Calligraphy ink set. I absolutely love these because they come in a huge range of colours and they are so vibrant and pretty. You can of course use these with a calligraphy pen, but today we're going to be using a paintbrush to add the detail to our watercolour lettering. Finally, we will also be using the Manuscript Duotip markers. These pens have two different ends to them. So there is a fine tip, which is 0.83mm, and then a chisel tip, which is 3mm. We'll be focusing on using the fine tip today to add in details to our watercolour lettering. However, the chisel tip is great for creating thicker lines and also doing more traditional Gothic styles of calligraphy. So for this project, as well as using a variety of Manuscript products, we're also going to be using some watercolour paper. This watercolour paper does have a little bit of texture. I wouldn't recommend using texture paper all the time with brush pens because there can be a risk of fraying them. However, if you're creating a final piece, then it can work as a one-off. This watercolour paper is relatively smooth as well, so I'm pretty confident that the pens will work nicely on this. I also have a little pot of water to dip my paintbrush in, and I'm going to be using a pencil to sketch out the initial design. For this workshop, we're going to be writing the quote, "Create your own rainbow," which seems only fitting when we're using a variety of lovely bright colours. To start off, we're just going to sketch out our design really lightly with a pencil. I'm going to start with the word rainbow, as I know that I want this to kind of be the star of the show when it comes to the letters. You don't want to press too hard when sketching out these letters, as you don't want to have the pencil showing through the pen afterwards. As the tips of these brush pens are quite good, you just need to bear in mind that you're leaving enough space for those thick and thin lines. So now I'm just sketching in the words "your own," as I just want them to fit into this space here before we reach the B. The bonus of using a pencil first is if you're not 100% sure about the layout, you can always rub it out and change it up. So this works quite nicely as the create your own is sitting within this space, and then we have the rainbow underneath here. At the moment there's some blank space here, and we're actually going to incorporate a rainbow into this space. I'm just going to lightly sketch that in for now. As you can see, we now have a very light sketch of our design, and it's now time to go in with the brush pens to bring this to life. So for this workshop, we are going to be focusing on 2 different blending styles. So the first blending style I'm going to do for create your own, and then we're going to do a slightly different blending style for rainbow. So for this first technique of blending, we want to pick a colour that has 2 shades. So I think the best one here will be these blue colours, as we've got a clear light blue and a darker blue. We're going to start off by just using this lighter blue colour, and we're going to write out the words. Now you can use your pencil markings as a guide, but you don't have to trace over them exactly. If you find that the pen flows a little bit differently to how your pencil marks were drawn, then that is okay. So for example, I can see this E, I made the top circular bit quite small, whereas I definitely want that to be a bit bigger now I'm using the brush pens. So when it comes to creating calligraphy, we just want to make sure that whenever you are going down, it's a thick line, and whenever you go up, it's a thin line. These brush pens make it really easy to create those thick and thin lines, and you can smoothly transition between them too on the curves. So to prevent any smudging, we're going to focus on blending this word create first before we move on to your own. So now you've written out your word, if you take the darker brush pen, and we just want it to be darker towards the top of each of the letters. So for this, I'm just going to lightly brush in with this dark colour. So we just want to get some of the colour down towards the top of each of the letters, but you don't need to colour in each one perfectly. Once we've got all of the ink down where we want it to, we'll then come in with our paintbrush, and that's when we'll start blending it all together. Okay, so now we're going to take the paintbrush. This paintbrush came in the set with the pens, which is so handy. We're just going to dip it into some water. You want to make sure the paintbrush is wet but not dripping, as it's important to have a little bit of control over this blending. And then you just want to come in, and I like to brush up from the light and into the dark. If you brush downwards from the dark into the light, then sometimes it can be a bit overpowering and take over all of that light colour. You can see that I'm just creating really smooth strokes with this. I'm not pushing the paintbrush down, and I'm just doing quick strokes. This gives a little bit more control, and it makes sure that we're not applying too much water to one place. I love that it just instantly transforms the ink, so it goes from quite a solid colour to what feels like a more watercolour texture. And you can see that it's slowly starting to blend the dark blue and light blue together. You may wish to wipe your brush every so often and just dip in with some more clean water. And again, I'm just going to brush up from this light colour into the dark blue just to give it a bit more of a blended effect. I also like to pull the water through all the way on the lighter colour, as this just adds to that watercolour effect. Sometimes I feel like if you don't pull it all the way through, it looks a little bit jarring where the water has touched the ink and where it hasn't. So you can see up close that adding that water has created a really lovely smooth blended effect. By using a light colour and a dark colour, it creates this really lovely depth to the lettering. So I'm just going to go through the rest of these letters now. And as I said, I'm always starting from the light colour and pushing up into that dark colour, just so we're not pulling that dark colour too far down. You may find that your thin lines become a little bit thicker just where the water is reacting with the ink, and that is totally fine as long as your thick lines and thin lines are still contrasting with each other, then that's what's important. So I'm just dipping my brush back in the water, getting some of that dark blue ink off, so then I can go in at this lighter part of the R, and I'm just pulling up a little bit and then pulling down. So let's do that for the E. I always tend to start in the thicker part of the letter and then go into the thinner part. This is because at the start my brush tends to have a bit more water on it, and if I go into the thinner part straight away it might be too much water and then it starts to blob a little bit, and we don't want any blobbing. So now I've done that thicker part, we can go into this thinner part, and we just have a little bit more control once the brush has been used and some of that excess water has come off. You can see that although I've added the colour to all the letters at the same time, I'm blending one letter at a time afterwards. So I'm trying to connect the letters into each other. So we're going into this light bit, and this E is just thickened up there a bit, which is totally fine. And then I'm going to pull up into this A, and this just gives it a bit more of a fluid movement. So I'm just pulling up into that A and then going into the dark blue areas first, because I've got excess dark blue ink on the nib of my brush. I don't want to start going into the light blue area, as that's going to turn it dark blue. So now I've just added a little bit of water to those darker areas. Again, I'm just going to clean off my brush, get some more water on it, but make sure it's not dripping. And then we're going to go back to this lighter area of the A and just pull up through. Now, you may want to have your edges a little bit crisper, but I actually personally prefer the lovely watermark that watercolour lettering has. So if you find there's a little bit of ink bleeding, I think that just adds to the style of the lettering. And again, I'm just going to pull up from this A and into the T. Now, as the T is a bit of a taller letter, you can see that there is more dark blue, but the aim for the dark blue is that it kind of sits halfway across all of the lower letters. So for the C and the T, there is a bit more dark blue there. One thing I did do is I crossed the T with the light blue, and actually that was probably a little bit unnecessary because we are just having it all in dark blue. So because I don't want to smudge anything, I'm just going to tilt the paper, and I'm firstly just going to focus on this dark blue crossbar. That's because I want it to have that watercolour effect like the other strokes, but it's not really blending into any other colour, and I didn't want to end up smudging the T. So I've just tilted the paper so I can focus on this crossbar initially and just get it flowing, making it a little bit more like watercolour lettering. So that's worked much better, and even though you could see some of the light blue underneath, that is now gone. So I'm just dipping my brush back in that water, and then I'm going to go from the light blue again, and I'm going to push up into this dark blue, and you can see I'm just doing little strokes up into the dark blue, just making sure that edging is blended, and then I'm ensuring any light blue that's still showing through is covered by blending with this brush and water. If you are left-handed, then what you can actually do is start from the right and go to the left. That means that you're less likely to smudge any of the ink when it's wet. I think that's the bonus with brush pens like this, is that they are super fast drying, so they work for left-handed people. But when it comes to the watercolour, it can be a little bit daunting, as I know that you feel like you could easily smudge it, but you have the control to blend in the direction you want to. Because you're not having to write it out with a brush, it's already written up for you. It's just coming in and adding those touches up. It means that it makes watercolour lettering a lot more accessible for you without the risk of smudging. So I'm just going back in to this T and I'm pulling it around to the E. And then we're just pulling up into that dark blue again. You can see how simple this technique is. You could even do this with uppercase letters like block capitals if you're not so confident with modern calligraphy style, or just any sort of lettering style. So you start off by writing the word with the light colour, and then you come in with the darker colour and just pick where you'd like that darker colour. I personally prefer the darker colour at the top, but I'm going to show you with your own how it looks at the bottom so you can have a nice contrast. Part of the reason I've gone for these lovely blue tones is it kind of makes me think of the rain when it's mixed with the water, and obviously you can't have a rainbow without rain. Okay, so that's our first watercolour word done. Now we are going to move on to the next set. This is going to be using the same technique. However, we're just going to be putting the dark blue in a different place. We still start with the light colour blue. And because these letters are a little bit smaller, I'm not pressing as hard for these thick lines. So we've written the word your own, and now I want the dark colour to be more towards the bottom of the letters. So we're just going to go in like before and add in that dark colour and bringing it up to about halfway. You can see I'm being quite rough and ready with this. I'm not pressing too hard with the pen. So as these letters are a little bit smaller, we just want to be extra careful when it comes to blending. Again, we're going from light to dark, but as the dark is in the bottom part of the letters, we are blending downwards this time. And just like before, we're going to follow the letter all the way through, so it feels like it's really lovely and fluid. So as you can see, we've used the same watercolour blending technique, but it's just given a slightly different feel depending on where the dark colour is. Now I'm just going to speed up the rest of these letters so we can then move on to the next type of blending. So those words are looking gorgeous, if I do say so myself. Now it's time to have fun with a variety of colours. So for the next blending technique, I'm going to show you how you can blend multiple colours into each other to create a beautiful rainbow effect. So we've got the word rainbow here, and each letter is going to be a different colour. So just like our previous blending technique, we just want to start off by focusing on writing each letter first. So I've started with that yellow, we're then going to come in with this orange. And as these letters are quite large, I don't mind pressing a little harder to get some slightly thicker downstrokes. Going in with this red colour. And although this eye connects smoothly into the end, I'm just going to break it off and then come back in with this pink, and we're going to do the whole N in this pink. And now we're going to start blending these inks together. This actually looks really lovely just as it does now, but I want to create that watercolour effect that we have for Create Your Own. So I'm just going to dip my brush in this water. And I'm going to start off on the yellow just to make it feel a bit more like watercolour. And the bonus of starting on this yellow is it is lighter than that orange. So when we pull into the orange, it will blend quite nicely. Now what you can do if you'd like it to be a little bit more pigmented at the blend is I'm actually just going to come back in with the orange. And then you can go back in with the paintbrush. And then that's just added a bit more of a blend from this R to the A. Again, I'm just doing small little strokes just to get enough water coverage on the ink. It's just giving a little bit more control compared to if I just traced the letters with the paintbrush like I did with the brush pens. Again, this orange is lighter than the red, which works nicely because we can then blend up into the red. And actually, sometimes I do quite like to just go back and forth just to soften it. Because they're different colours rather than different shades, sometimes the blend may be a little harsher. So just working in that water and moving the ink back and forth can really help. Now, although the dot isn't being blended with another colour, again, I'm just going to come in and add some water to give that watercolour effect. So I'm just pulling up into this red and then into the pinky purple, which is just a gorgeous colour anyway. And you can see it's blended really nicely on this curve. So adding the water to these pens just makes that blend a little bit smoother. So we're just going to continue along these letters until we've blended each one together. How gorgeous does that look? So that's two very simple techniques that you can do with these Aquabrush pens and a little bit of water with the paintbrush. Now this piece isn't quite finished. We have some empty space and we could definitely add a little bit more detail. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Firstly, we want to draw in a little bit of a basic rainbow here. We're not going to use all of these colours. So for this, I am going to use my watercolour brush pens again, and I'm just going to lightly draw in a curve shape. So for this part of the blending, what I want to do is take the colour downwards, but I don't want to blend it upwards. So I want to blend it out so it eventually fades into the paper. So for this, I'm just dipping my paintbrush in water. I'm touching where the edge of the ink is, and then I'm just pulling it downwards. So I don't want to go above the ink line, I'm just wanting to go below. And we're still going in that arched direction. I love how you can make these inks as pigmented or as transparent as you want just by adding some water. And what I'm going to do is just add in a little bit more ink below just so we can get more of a gradient effect. So now you can see it goes from quite vibrant and it's blending in, so it eventually fades out. So that shows you a really lovely way that you can use these watercolour brush pens for things like illustration and to add gradients and shadows to your work as well. Now I want to add in some sparkly detail just to add a little bit more balance to this piece. So we're going to add in some sparkle shapes using the Duotip markers. For this, all you want to do is draw a cross shape. So you want a long straight line and then across the middle a smaller horizontal line like this, and then we're just going to connect the points with a curve like so, and then you can just fill in this shape. And now I'm just going to add in a few of those all around the page at various sizes. The next stage of this project is to add in some sparkle, which is my absolute fave. But before we do that, we're just going to go in with a rubber and rub out any pencil markings while the ink is dry. So you need to make sure that all of the ink is fully dried before you do this. And using a small rubber like this means you can really get in to those difficult to reach areas. To add some sparkle, I'm going to be using this glittering gold, which is absolutely gorgeous. You need to make sure you give it a good shake. And I'm going to be using the paintbrush from that brush pen set. And firstly, I just want to dab in a little bit of the gold, and we're just going to add it to these sparkles. So you could just do this straight off with the paintbrush and the shimmering ink. However, I quite like that you can draw out the shapes first using the double-ended tip just to make sure you're getting the right shape. And I'm just going over those shapes and adding in this gorgeous gold colour. And because the double tip markers are water-based, it does mean that it is blending out the ink a little bit. You may just need to keep giving the ink a shake just to make sure you're getting all of that gorgeous shimmering gold. So you can see that we're starting to get a little bit of lovely sparkle using these shim inks. I feel like this piece as a whole just needs a bit more colour and a bit more energy. So what we're going to do is firstly add in lots of little colourful dots, kind of like confetti, all around these words using the double tip markers. This set has got 20 colours, so we've got lots of different colours to play with. I want these to be quite big circles, just so they stand out. But I'm using the fine tip end just because it gives a little bit more control. Okay, now we've added the confetti circles in, you can see that it's brought it to life a little bit more, but I feel like it just needs a bit more shimmer. So I think it would be really lovely to add a shimmer effect to this rainbow here, just to make it pop a little bit more. And then I'm going to show you a really fun splatter technique too. So I'm going to start off with the Festive Sparkle, which is a green. Give it a good shake. Apply some of that festive green to the edge of this rainbow. And that's just creating a really lovely sparkly effect. And I just want to blend it out a little bit, just like we did with the ink underneath. So I'm just going to go in with a little bit of water on the brush and just pull it down. So the watercolour pens have created a really lovely base for this shimmer. But you can see it's added a little bit more pigment and some lovely sparkle as well. And you can blend it with that water just to soften it a little bit. So that's created a really lovely sparkle on the green. And we're just going to go in with the blue. So I've got Ocean Wave here. And then we're going to use Rose Quartz for the red and then the Glittering Gold for the yellow. So that rainbow is standing out a lot more now, and it's got a beautiful shimmer to it. The final thing we're going to do just to finish off this piece and create that little bit more energy is a really fun splatter technique. Just to make it more random, I do like to spin the paper around as well, so the flicking is going in different directions. Grab your next colour, make sure it's shaken up, dip in your brush, make sure your brush is nice and clean before you dip it in. And then just go in again, adding some colourful splats. So using that fun method to create ink splatters doesn't just add some lovely shine to your piece, it also creates a lovely watercolour effect that complements the watercolour lettering that you've already done. If you'd like to have a go at this project yourself, then you'll be able to find all the links for the products in the description below. I love how vibrant and bright all the inks have turned out, and the shimmer just adds something extra special. I hope you enjoyed watching this workshop. If you follow along and share your creation on social media, I'd absolutely love to see it. So please do tag myself, which is Blink Lettering, and also Manuscript Pen Co. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye!